All right, this is episode 2 of the Athlete's Edge podcast powered by PVL. Find us on social at Pure Vita Labs and online at pvl.com. And today you'll notice I'm wearing my Gold Series hat, Justin, for a very special reason. We have a 3-time Olympian gold medalist and 4-time world bobsled champion, Canadian, Justin Kripps. Justin, how are you?
Good, thanks. How you doing?
Good. Firstly, where are you? Because I know we're all in a strange time here with quarantine, and sometimes I message you and we DM back and forth, and you know you're from Hawaii, born and bred, and then obviously you have a place in Calgary. Sometimes you're in BC, and I think you said you're in California now. So
yeah, I'm in California right now. I'm actually a triple citizen of Canadian, U.S. and Australian. But yeah, I mean, I happen to be down in California, visiting my girlfriend. She lives in LA, and her family has a place in La Quinta near Palm Springs.
Okay, cool.
When all this stuff kind of started going down, and her family left to go back to Calgary. They have work and stuff like that, and family there, and we decided that we'd shelter in place like the order said. We had kind of had no problem staying down here. We have health insurance and everything like that, and also there's my season had just ended, and so there wasn't really much for me to go back to in Calgary, and I was kind of making quick decisions and thinking, like, do I go back to Calgary and sit inside in my apartment for who knows how long, right? Who knows how long it's going to go on for, or do we stay here? And it's warm, and we could be together here, and my girlfriend Bree didn't have anything to go back to Calgary for either. She works and lives in LA, so at least if things kick back up there before they do back home, she can go there, and she works as a professional dancer, doing like plays and stuff. So I mean, it's unlikely that comes back too quickly, but yeah, to answer your question, we're in California. The weather's great, so we're happy and healthy, and
good to be down where somewhere it's warm. And I think last time I talked to you, I think you just pulled a hamstring, and I guess not a bad place to rehab down there. But is that fully healed up and you're feeling better?
Yeah. So I mean, I got lucky with the timing, really. Obviously it was unfortunate that I kind of had that injury at World Championships, but at the same time, that was the last race and plenty of time to rehab. And I managed to get a couple therapy sessions in Calgary with my physio there and get diagnostics and stuff done before coming to California and before all the pandemic stuff hit. So I had a really good rehab plan to just do on my own and execute down here. And it worked out great because, a big part of hamstring rehab is getting back kind of running slowly and doing kind of tempos and shuttle runs and stuff. And at the point in my rehab I was doing that, it was 25 degrees here, and back in Calgary it was minus 20. So it would have been a lot harder to do it there.
Yeah. And what's your setup like in terms of, are you able to get by? I mean, obviously we'll get into some of your training and things like that later that, allow you to do what you do. But how do you have a little bit of a setup to be able to do? I know everyone's doing their home workouts and stuff like that, but do you have at least something to get by in terms of keeping yourself in shape and ready to go?
Yeah. So, I mean, we had to get creative a little bit with that.
Like most people are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The first kind of month of hamstring rehab and whatever is pretty easy. You don't need much. And then I bought like a set of resistance bands that go from kind of like 10 pounds up to 160 sort of thing. And I was really lucky. I think I was on the first wave of people buying that sort of stuff online, because it actually got delivered to me pretty quickly. And then I've heard from other people it's taking a long time to get stuff. But that's been really good. Like I'm actually really kind of happy to be doing this sort of different training, and it's kind of challenging my body in different ways. And I'm surprised at how much you can do with just a set of resistance bands.
I think a lot of people are learning that, using more body weight, getting creative, finding things outside. I mean, it's kind of for people that are dedicated to fitness, on our side, and even you at the elite level, it's sort of threw everybody into a bit of a tailspin of what to do and how to keep that up. But we'll get a little bit more into your training next. And I think a lot of people would find it interesting for someone who is dominant at a winter sport that you were born in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
like
I
you
mean,
must get that a lot.
yeah, for sure. It's almost like the Jamaican bobsled
I was
team
gonna
kind of
say,
thing,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it's just sort of like how it worked out, a kind of crazy sequence of events. And my parents, is sort of the short version of it, is my parents live in Hawaii in the winter
oh,
and
I
in
see,
Canada in the summer.
that makes
And
sense.
when I was born, they were doing an aid work contract with UNICEF in Cambodia, and they had flown my mom and dad out of Cambodia to Hawaii to have me born, so that I wouldn't, be born in Cambodia, which at the time was not
Sure.
recognized by the UN. And so that's how I ended up being kind of born in the States. It's just a lot easier for them to go there than back to Canada. And then 3 weeks later, we went back to Cambodia for 18 months,
Wow.
and then after their contract was done there, we started sort of going back and forth as a family. Um, from Hawaii to Summerland, BC, and ended up staying in Canada for once we got to high school age, just because the school system
Sure.
was just suited us better, and it seemed like a better fit in Canada. And then so consequently went to a university in Canada, and that's where I sort of got scouted for the bobsleigh thing.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Just doing a little bit of research. When you look up, one of the things I wanted to find out, how fast does a bobsled go? A lot of people would want to know that, and it says here as a bit of a translation, bobsleigh can attain a speed of 150 kilometers an hour, 93 miles, with the reported world record being over 200. And it says here, bobsled competitors are very noble. I think that's a pretty good way to describe it. But also, your journey comes from track and field. And I read here that, in my era, Ben Johnson was a reason for a lot of people getting into track and field and things like that. Yours was Donovan Bailey.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, track was kind of my first real sport that I did outside of just, kind of doing surfing and that sort of thing when I was a little kid.
Sure.
But yeah, I saw Donovan Bailey run in the 96 games where he got gold there. And I was pretty inspired. I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And obviously in the summer when that happened, we were in Summerland, and my parents live on an orchard there. So I immediately went out and started training to be a sprinter in the orchard, running down the lanes there. And yeah, continued on with that for quite some time.
I mean, the crossovers in terms of body mechanics and things like that, the need to be explosive, they definitely translate. It's just such a difference, obviously, between, what causes a human being to want to go 200 miles an hour down a tunnel of ice. I mean, I think sports, they all have a little bit at the top level, a little bit of performance anxiety and stress, but that adds a whole element of fear that I don't think people have ever experienced in real life, much less performing in front of crowds and things like that. Talk about maybe the first time that you ever kind of achieved those speeds and getting on an ice track.
Yeah, it's
It's a
yeah,
rush.
200 miles an hour is I haven't heard of that, but definitely 150 kilometers an hour is a pretty common thing, especially in Whistler. But it's like, especially coming from track, and you're just used to doing that physical bit, and then the race is over at that point. When you get into bobsleigh, all of a sudden, you jump into this little steel and carbon fiber tube and just absolutely start ripping down this mountain. And when you first make that transition, you're brakeman, so you're in the back of the sled. You don't see very much. It's a very interesting sensation, because you can feel that you're doing something really crazy and really fast, and it's very violent in the back, even if it's a good
Sure.
run. Just there's no suspension really. There's like a little bit of articulation in the front, but it's just steel on ice. So like you hit these 6.5 G-force corners, and it's just like there's nothing absorbing it. You just slam into it, slam out of it, and it's very whippy. And in the back, you're not seeing anything. So it's just this like violent experience with no visual orientation. So it's a really, really unique experience. Everybody is completely surprised the first time they go down a bobsleigh track.
Now, it's not something I think a lot of people understand in terms of, like, there's 2-man, there's 4-man, there's a pilot, there's the brakeman. Do you get, especially if, say, being in the back as a brakeman, do you get the sensation when you know you've had a good run without being visually able to see? I mean, you say it's violent, but can your body just tell, because it's all about seconds, the difference between a good run and a bad one?
After a while, for sure. Like once you've got some experience as a brakeman, you can kind of tell. It's still violent on a good run, but you can kind of tell if you're hitting the right spots, kind of thing. Like, you'll learn to know the difference between kind of abruptly coming out of a corner, which might be normal or the right thing, versus kind of smashing sideways into a wall. Whereas, the first couple of times you go down the track, it just feels like you're in a washing machine. You don't know what's going on.
Yeah, that's
but
a good way to say it.
Eventually you get the hang of it, and the brakeman will know to a reasonable extent if you've had a good run or not.
Now, what's the, obviously 2-man and 4-man, we get the difference there, but what are the sort of the differences in competition, popularity, what you see more of? What do you prefer?
Yeah. So, 4-man's usually considered the kind of marquee event. Like it's the big one. The sleds are faster, bigger, more expensive. There's more crashes. There's more kind of mess ups when everybody's getting into the sled. There's just a lot more going on with all those people getting in, especially coming over the sides and kind of loading into that tight spot.
Yeah.
They're harder to drive. It's kind of like your 2-man is like a Formula One car. It's very nimble. It's quick. It's easy to change direction. And then the 4-man is more like driving a water truck almost, but it goes faster than your Formula One car. So you're almost like you kind of driving on eggshells, and it's kind of tippy because there's more weight up high behind you. So it's a really it's harder to get the hang of than 4-man. I prefer 4-man just because it's more difficult. You get more of like a adrenaline rush. Like when I drive a 2-man, I'm just very, very confident that I can get out of any situation that happens. And that might not be true, but in the 4-man, I know that it's like, it's intense. And especially if you're at a hard track, my eyes are wide, the heart rate's going, and you get that rush, which sometimes you kind of, once you get good at the sport, you don't get as much in the 2-man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, is there one that you prefer, one or the other, in terms of being a pilot or the brakeman?
Yeah, I think generally everybody prefers 4-man. I prefer to drive the 4-man just for the intensity of it and the team aspect. You have your whole crew involved, whereas in the 2-man, you just have the one guy from the crew in with the pilot. And there's just there's more camaraderie, you share as a whole crew in the success. You do that in 2-man as well, but the guys who aren't in the sled, they're such a big part of the result, but they don't get, obviously that recognition and stuff like that. So in the 4-man, it's really nice to have everybody involved in the result and the success.
Now, with 4-man, is there a difference in terms of the physical demand and the necessities for each to be sort of physically powered to do something different? Meaning, obviously the takeoff is extremely explosive. It's sprinting. It's all out effort. Is there physical differences in terms of each man's position and responsibility?
Yeah. So usually your 2-man guy is kind of your biggest guy, and he's often the most powerful, but he has to have a good balance. He needs to have like a decent amount of top speed as well.
Right.
And a lot of, like, these days, a lot of times it's kind of skewing towards taller athletes who have long levers, because when the sled is kind of stationary or going slow and you're just getting it moving, having that ground contact time to apply force to the sled for a longer period of time with those long levers is really advantageous. And then in the 4-man, you have to balance all of the guys with fitting in the sled, but also kind of, in a perfect world, you'd have your sort of top speed of the athletes increase as you get further back in the sled, because the brakeman, the true brakeman on the foreman, the guy at the very back, gets in last. So, and you're running downhill, right? So he has to be able to apply force to the sled at a much higher speed than, say, the pilot or the guy who loads second.
Oh, absolutely. So talk a little bit. I had read, some of the inspiration, and I'm always, interested in mindset and, how the top do what they do, elite level athletes, etc. I read here a quote that you had said about, something that sticks with you today, and it seems almost overly simple, but your mother in your mind saying, do your best. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Every time. I mean, it seems to work, but talk about, your ascension in sports and when it became sort of clear, like, hey man, this is like a serious thing, to the point where you're, competing in Vancouver on the world stage and walking into an Olympic Games.
Yeah, it's just that little quote that my mom said, for it was my first provincial track meet when I was like 9 or 10,
Yeah.
the provincial elementary school track finals. And I was pretty nervous because, in Summerland, like, we run on a grass field in our sneakers, wearing like
Sure.
giant baggy t-shirts and stuff. And then we get down to Vancouver, and everybody's got sprint spikes, and they got little skin tight pennies. And,
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, how do I stack up against these guys? And my mom was kind of like, well, just do your best. That's all you can do anyway. And yeah, it stuck with me. And as the stakes got higher and the pressure got higher, it's something I always came back to. If I felt myself kind of overthinking things or feeling that pressure, I would just remind myself, just stay calm and do your best. That's all you can do. And if you do that, you have no choice but to be happy with your performance, because you did all you can do.
Yeah. Talk a little bit. I mean, your nickname is Beastmode. I mean, obviously, I mean, that encourages a pretty solid. I mean, a lot of people would be envious to have that name, and tell us where the background of Beastmode comes from.
Yeah, I don't know who actually came up with that, but it was I was one of the first kind of like Olympic level brakemen to switch into the driver's seat. And so, like,
Interesting.
nowadays there's a lot of really top push athletes that have become drivers. But at the time, it was kind of like I was sort of like an exceptional pusher for a driver. And so, all the brakemen who were at even like a lower level, right? Because I had to restart as a pilot and work my way back up the ranks. Whereas I went to the Olympics as a brakeman and then switched to driving, and I had to start at the bottom, right? And kind of move up. So the brakemen that I was with when I switched to being a pilot were, quite far down the ladder athletically in the program. And everybody wanted to push with me,
Sure.
not because I was a good driver, but because they would get a good start time and kind of look good. So some of them started calling me Beast Mode because they wanted to push with old Beast Mode there and get a good time and look good. So I don't remember who came up with it, but that was kind of the, obviously they probably had watched football and seen Marshawn Lynch called Beast Mode and
no, it's a good one to stick. So, I mean, at the height of it, I mean, you hear even athletes, NBA, people that actually, a lot of hockey players, there's Stanley Cups, there's, the World Championships, but something is special about a gold medal and the Olympics in general. I mean, there's a lot of people say that's the highest honor you can achieve in sports. Talk about, your Olympic achievements and your experience in something that a lot of people would, attribute to being the best you can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it is just such a hard thing to do. And that's kind of, I think, what makes it so special. You only have the opportunity once every 4 years, which is kind of unique. Those sports, football and hockey and stuff, the major championship is every year, right? And
that's right, yeah.
Not that it's easy to win by any means, but some of these Olympic sports, all of them, really, just the amount of pressure that brings, that you only have one shot every 4 years, and you might only be in your prime for that one Olympic cycle, and a lot of the races and competitions come down to just such small margins, and they're so short. Like in bobsleigh, I kind of tell people, when you're driving a sled, like it's very there's a lot of kind of finesse and touch that goes into it. And like, if you imagine just like one little finger twitch at the wrong time, that could
Unbelievable.
kill all your chances, and yeah, like it took a lot of I kind of had this inflection point in my career. I would have been like 8 years into my career, maybe more. And I was 5 years into my driving career, where originally I had the mindset that if you work really hard in the gym and you listen to the coaches and you try to do the driving lines properly, you'll have success. And I kind of realized that that's not good enough, like, because that's literally what everybody is doing. Everybody's trying really hard. Everybody is doing what their coaches say. And I kind of, between me and this company I partner with, I use a sports psych through them, and they kind of said, the mental aspect is so huge in these sports. It's what separates people at the top. And I started really working on that aspect. And one of the key questions that he asked me was, like, do you know why you've won a race, and why, like, when it doesn't go well, why that happened? And
Interesting question.
I was kind of like, because at the time I had won a World Cup,
Right.
but I had like almost no other good results as a driver.
Interesting.
I had like a couple decent ones, but he asked me, so what happened in that race? Why did you win that race? And I like had no idea, like I had no answer for it. It happened. And he said, you need to start being very aware of your mental state when you're driving the sled. So every training run, just make a note of what kind of mental state you're in, whether kind of your mind's spinning, or you feel very calm, or you feel very focused, or excited, whatever it may be. Make a mental note of it, do your run, and then start to correlate what headspace equals what kind of driving performance. And then you can zero in on what you need to try to create for yourself on race days. And that was super powerful, because it led me to realize what my zone was, or my flow state, and for me, it's a very kind of calm state where I'm not really thinking about anything. I'm excited, but I'm not like agitated, I'm not overly anxious or anything. And once you identify that, then you can work on recreating it. And, you can start by doing that in a quiet room, like meditation style.
Visualization is key, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then you can start trying to do it in more high pressure situations, like, or different situations. Like, something we would do is do like a max power clean, or like a all out 45-meter sprint. And then, like, as soon as I'm done it, start trying to settle into that headspace, because that's what happens on the track, right? You do this all out physical effort, and then you jump in the driver's seat and you have to like calm down and get sort of zen and all that. And so practicing that in different situations and under pressure was really key in kind of like getting myself into the right headspace to perform every time.
It's an interesting statement, because I'm sure physically so many of the guys are, there's very little separation, but when it comes down to seconds, it's the mindset. Is everyone working as a cohesive unit? Is this happening together? Is everyone clicking? I mean, there's so much that has to go right. I mean, you must at night sometimes dream of the perfect run, in your head, seeing I'm sure it happens. When you visualize that often, it almost becomes a muscle memory in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such a huge part of our sport, because you actually spend such a little amount of time driving down the track. Like, each run is about a minute. You usually do 2 a day.
Yeah.
For 5 days a week for kind of 4 or 5 months in the season. And that's, like, compared to most other sports, that's nothing, right? Like, I spend just 100 times that much lifting weights,
Absolutely.
And so you don't have that much time actually on the track. So you need to learn to visualize, because each visualization you do, once you get good at it, is almost the same as taking a rep on the track. And so you can really get that dialed in. And I mean, it helps a ton, because the devil's in the details with a sport that's measured to the 100th.
So from going to mindset, let's talk a little bit about the physical stuff. And obviously, as a supplement company, and we're all about training. We're all about recovery and keeping the body strong. Tell us about what goes into training for bobsleigh, and what your unique exercises would be. I bet some people would probably be surprised by the types of things you do. Obviously, on social, we see you doing heavy squats and things like that you might expect. But talk a little bit about your personal physical training.
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of heavy lifting for the whole body, but obviously the focus is on the legs. But then you have to make sure you can transfer that power through your upper body and into the sled.
Yeah.
So we train like sprinters for the most part, do a lot of kind of 30 to 45 meter sprints, but then we stack a lot of weight training on top of that, because obviously you have to be really strong to get the heavy sleds moving, and you also have to be heavy. There's a
Yeah, I
there's a
guess so.
maximum weight for the crew plus the sled, and so kind of the optimum way to do it is to have your sled right down next to the minimum weight and have the entire crew plus the sled be close to the maximum. So you have a bunch of big, strong, fast guys pushing a light sled, and then you still have that weight going down the track, which is an advantage. So all those things make it kind of a balancing act, because you want the speed of a world-class sprinter with the strength of an Olympic lifter, and your weight kind of somewhere in between, where you're kind of always around this like 100 kilo to 110 kilo kind of range. And so, yeah, we generally sprint a ton and then do a lot of heavy squats, heavy power cleans, and light dynamic stuff like light snatches and box jumps, and then just we have bodybuilding days too.
And how much of say a training week would be dedicated to weights versus sprinting? I mean, I'm sure over the years and with the great coaching you've had and things like that, you've sort of adapted a program and found what works for you. Because what works for some people doesn't work for others, and you might find, I get a lot more results out of front squat. Like there's all kinds of different things, right? How much of
Yeah.
your training is divided up into what?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been lucky that I found a really good coach early, and I've been with him for the vast majority of my career. And he was a really good sprint coach. He had a couple sprinters that went to the Olympics for Canada, and so he's sort of figured out what works for me, and that is mostly a sprint-based program. With so we do three days a week of sprinting, and let's say we do our sprint training 5 days a week. It's just 3 days are actual sprints, and the
Right.
other two are kind of tempo days. So you're keeping the legs moving, but you're not pushing it at all. You're just sort of like going through the motions. And on the tempo days, we lift upper body weights, and on the hard sprint days, we do lower body weights. So there's two really hard lower body weights days. One's more dynamic, one's heavier, and then two hard upper body weights days. Same thing. One's really heavy and one's more kind of bodybuilding. And then the third sprint day is more of a plyo day. That's kind of how mine's broken down. So sort of those hard days they're kind of two workouts in the day, but we don't usually split them up by too much, because you kind of we want to go right from the sprinting to the lifting, so you're kind of getting it all in at once. That's what works best for me.
And how do you find, I mean, obviously with training comes recovery, with recovery becomes diet, with diet comes supplementation at certain times. Food is king. Is it a typical, what you would think, high protein? I imagine you would need a lot more carbohydrates than the average guy. How do you look at diet and training for your sport?
Yeah, it's always kind of been, I feel like your sort of diet and supplementation plan is extremely important. You really don't get as much out of your workouts if you don't have that dialed in. As kind of an athlete that's been around for a long time, I have a pretty decent system that I use, and it's kind of, for the most part, in the off season. Like, we're very much broken up into the on ice season and the off ice season. And the easiest way to describe my diet would be like carb cycling. So
Yeah.
I try to go kind of low carb on my not super hard days, and it depends on my body weight too. There are times where I just hammer food
Yeah.
indiscriminately,
Like
but
lately in quarantine.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I also do intermittent fasting, which I feel like keeps
Interesting.
me lean and kind of keeps my like my energy and kind of my, almost like my aggression up. I feel like if my
Right.
body's hungry, sometimes I feel more almost aggressive. Whereas if I'm always eating, like, a lot of a lot of nutritionists recommend, 6 small balanced meals a day spread out. That totally doesn't work for me. I just
Doesn't work
feel
for you.
like I just feel sort of like full and almost sleepy, like I don't feel like animalistic. I don't have that high testosterone feeling as I
Yeah.
do if I don't eat. Like intermittent fasting, I usually do like a few days a week. I'll do like a 6 to 8 hour feeding window, and I like to skip the breakfast on those days and kind of the first couple meals, and my first meal will be basically like my workout hydration / branch chains, like the amino complete is
Sure.
kind of the one I use for that, and then my shake and a big meal after training, because I feel like if I get to the gym kind of hungry on those days where it doesn't matter if I'm lifting my absolute max,
Yeah.
I just feel like I get a lot out of that, and it helps me stay lean and kind of aggressive. So that's sort of, carb cycling and intermittent fasting. And obviously like my diet is really high protein, especially, all year round, really.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So what's next for Justin in terms of competing? I mean, once we get back to a sense of normalcy, is it like the green jacket where you feel like you need to walk around with your gold medal around the house, to the bar, or whatever?
No.
But what's next for Justin in terms of your focus in terms next competition?
Yeah. So we've really been focusing on the 4-man. We had so much success in the 2-man over the last few years, and there's a couple things missing from like, the full roster of achievements that I can get. And honestly, like I could hang it up right now to be happy with that, just
Oh,
that gold
absolutely.
medal.
Yeah.
It's
World championships. Yeah.
yeah, it doesn't matter how good you are. It's just it's so hard to do with everything has to go perfect on that day kind of thing. But that being said, we hadn't had the success in 4-man. And so the kind of big goals now are winning a gold medal at world championships. We've had a couple silvers, a couple bronzes, gold at worlds in both the 2-man and 4-man are the goals. And then, getting that 4-man medal at the Olympics is a big one. And I know it's funny you mentioned the green jacket, because we kind of, there's the Olympics is one thing. Obviously, that's the biggest event in bobsleigh by a mile.
Absolutely.
But then there's world championships, but there's also the St. Moritz 4-man bobsleigh race every year is kind of like the Masters or the Wimbledon.
Good way to compare it.
Yeah. You have a shot every year at it, but it's the birthplace of bobsleigh, and 4-man's the marquee event, and it's the only natural track in the world. It's a weird race. It's hard to win because the conditions are so variable. And we won that race this year, which was just, I actually couldn't believe it at the time, like how excited I was about it. Like I'd won gold medals in 4-man before in World Cups. I'd won the Olympics, which I was more excited about, but this was number 2. Like all the world championship medals and stuff. We were so excited about this one because it's St. Moritz. It's this huge event, and in the 4-man we got it done, which like my best result in 4-man in St. Moritz was 11th before that. So we were just so pumped on it.
So is that like kind of the final check mark? I mean, it's like you said, you could hang it up now. Like if you want to compare it to golf, there's a lot of golfers that, they win all 3 other majors, but that Masters, if they've never won it, they don't feel complete. If you won at St. Moritz, is that now, man, your sense of accomplishment for what you've done and set out to do, it's off the charts.
Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, there's something special about that achievement. Like the kind of the big races that really mean something in bobsleigh, obviously, like kind of, if you talk to old bobsleigh pilots, old bobsleigh fans and stuff, people talk about like people who won 4-man in St. Moritz, people who won Olympic medals. And so it's just, it's kind of held on that same level, which is kind of crazy. But when I was there, I had so many kind of old timer bobsledders come up and being like, "Oh, you've joined like the ranks of the people that won St. Moritz 4-man and stuff." And it's such a, just because it's such a big part of the history of the sport, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool. Very, very nice box to check off. And I think also, you know, I would have been disappointed if I didn't have some sort of like big 4-man success moments, because I've had a lot in 2-man. But just this year and a little bit last year, we've started to get some of that 4-man success. And, you know, I didn't ever want to be just successful in 2-man. I almost felt like incomplete at that point. The 4-man is just, there's so much more that goes into it. It makes it hard to be successful, but the victories are pretty sweet.
Well, it's an amazing set of accomplishments. I mean, everyone would agree, and as Canadians, we're all really proud. But before we wrap it up, maybe just tell us. I mean, as I don't know if you describe bobsleigh as an adrenaline sport, but do you find out of competition, out of bobsleigh, that you're adrenaline junkie? Do you like to do those types of things? Are you chill? I know you like to travel. What is Justin like off the competition course?
Yeah, I mean, these days I don't take
Chill?
many risks. It's kind of the, you know, you don't want to get injured doing something stupid in the off season. But yeah, I mean, these days I love traveling. I love kind of hot weather destinations, especially, you know, when my training's not super serious.
Yeah.
Getting pretty into golf and mountain biking these days. I actually have one of those e-mountain bikes. Everybody makes fun of me because, you know, I'm supposed to be an Olympian in great shape and whatever, but you still get a pretty good workout. And I find like I can have a lot of fun and not be gassed for training the next day. So that's just been an absolute blast having one of those. And then, you know, ripping downhill, you get the adrenaline, but, you know, I don't push it so far that I'm going to break my neck or anything. So it's a good balance.
Well, we look forward to, you know, obviously things getting back to normal soon, watching you compete. You've been very gracious with us at PVL, and we're proud to be associated with you. And I know you've got a lot of other great sponsors, but, you know, just in thanking, we're going to close out with Beastmode, Justin Kripps, gold medalist. We've been thankful to have you. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, and thanks for your support.
You bet. Take care.